Snow whipped across the alien encampment in restless spirals, scattering fine crystals of ice against armored plating and humming power conduits. General Vorthen stepped from his dropship with a deliberate, disdainful grace, each footfall leaving a sharp imprint in the permafrost. The Arctic plains stretched before him in lifeless white, a terrain so bleak it offended his sense of order. He hated this world, its stubborn atmosphere, its bitter cold, its refusal to yield. Yet he hated even more the reason he had been summoned here. 3 Dominion patrols had vanished in this valley, and no one could explain how. Commander Elyth awaited him beside a flickering shield emitter. Frost clung to the alien officer's crest, dulling the iridescent sheen that marked his rank. He straightened as Vorthen approached, though the general barely acknowledged him. "The reports," Vorthen demanded, his voice clipped with impatience. Elyth handed him a data slate. "We recovered fragments of armor and traces of kinetic impact. No energy signatures. No plasma residue. Nothing matching Dominion technology." Vorthen's expression tightened. Kinetic impact? Humans still rely on ballistic weapons. Why would such relics threaten our forces? He flicked through the files, annoyance flaring in the sharp angle of his jaw. "Their bullets cannot breach our shields." "That was our assumption," Elyth answered carefully, "but the patrol footage indicates penetrations. Clean ones. Whoever fired did so with accuracy and intent." Vorthen raised his gaze toward the distant ridgeline where twilight blurred into the storm. He loathed the suggestion that humans, underevolved, sentimental, militarily archaic, might possess anything resembling tactical proficiency. The Dominion had swept across Earth with crushing momentum, their energy weapons and shielded infantry overwhelming human defenses within weeks. Only stubborn pockets of resistance remained, and those were already withering. This valley should have been insignificant. Instead, it was becoming an irritation. Elyth gestured toward the terrain. "We believe the attacks originated from that cluster of ice formations. The angles match the trajectories." "Formations?" Vorthen scoffed. "You mean snow piles." He dismissed the notion with a wave. "Humans hide like rodents, shoot blindly from crevices. There is no art to their tactics." Yet beneath his contempt, a faint discord lingered. The patrols had vanished without alerting their sensors. No energy discharge had been detected. No operational signature suggested human vehicles or drones. Something had stalked them with precision, and that alone unsettled him far more than he would admit. He strode toward the holographic display array set up in a makeshift command alcove. A clean projection of the valley hovered above the table, tinted blue by the shield lamp overhead. Vorthen traced a claw across the map, highlighting the final transmissions of the missing troops. All paths converged toward a single vantage point overlooking the encampment. A solitary location, perfectly placed for observation, perfectly placed for death. "We advance at once," Vorthen declared. "Prepare reconnaissance units. We will flush out whatever primitive creature lurks here." Elyth hesitated only a second. "General, if the attacker is a marksman, advancing directly may expose." Vorthen snapped his gaze toward him. "I do not fear human toys. Assemble the troops." The commander bowed and hurried off. For a moment, Vorthen stood alone beside the map, watching snow pelt the shield dome in frantic bursts. He had faced rebellions, insurgents, and rival empires, yet rarely had he encountered an enemy who struck with silence instead of spectacle. It made the valley feel alive, as though an unseen presence watched him from the storm. He dismissed the sensation. Humans lacked subtlety. This was likely an isolated survivor, delusional with cold and desperation. But as Vorthen left the command alcove, a distant glint flashed along the ridge, seen only for a heartbeat, swallowed instantly by swirling ice. He didn't notice it. Someone else noticed him. Staff Sergeant Mason Hale lay half-buried in the snow, his body cocooned in layers of white mesh and insulated camouflage that blurred his outline into the frozen terrain. The world around him was silent except for the faint hiss of the wind curling over the ridges. His breath condensed in shallow clouds, each one carefully timed to the rhythm of his heartbeat. At a glance, he could have been another mound of snow, lifeless and still, but behind his frost-dusted goggles, his eyes were alive with precision. Hale had been watching the alien landing zone for 2 days straight, sleeping in fragments, feeding on ration tabs that froze solid if he didn't warm them against his chest. He had seen 3 patrols vanish, not disappear in confusion, but vanish beneath clean, precise shots, his own. It wasn't arrogance that filled him with quiet satisfaction. It was purpose. These things had arrived on Earth expecting compliance. The Elyth Dominion had crushed entire continents in weeks, leaving cities smoldering beneath orbital fire. Yet here, in the cold nowhere of the Arctic, their advance had stalled against a single man with a rifle and patience honed by years of special operations. His rifle was a custom-built instrument, half carbon fiber, half steel, everything designed to survive hellish cold and unending recoil. Hale had modified it with his own hands. He knew every bolt, every subtle imperfection in the barrel. The scope was tuned for impossible distances, calibrated for crosswinds strong enough to peel, paint off metal. When he touched the trigger, it wasn't emotion, it was an extension of thought, a line of intention drawn between his heartbeat and a target miles away. He scanned the base through the optics, following the movement of tall, angular figures cloaked in shimmering armor. They moved with eerie grace, like machines pretending to be soldiers. Hale had studied them through observation, patterns of patrols, the way they turned their heads slightly before transmitting, the rhythm of their lights pulsing when they received orders. Every pattern had a weakness. He marked them all. The aliens had technology beyond comprehension, but they underestimated the oldest weapon on the planet: patience. Hale had grown up in the Rockies, where storms lasted for days and silence could crush the weak-minded. He had hunted elk with his father before he learned to speak incomplete sentences. Later, the Army had taken that instinct and sharpened it into something clinical. Out here, it all returned to simplicity: breath, wind, trigger. Through the scope, he spotted a cluster of alien officers inspecting a damaged drone. One of them, taller, adorned with crystal-plated armor, was barking orders. The movement of subordinates betrayed hierarchy. Hale adjusted the reticle, aligning it over the commanding figure's center mass. The rangefinder blinked, 1,976 meters. Wind speed, 8 knots northeast. Temperature, -31 Fahrenheit. He exhaled slowly, the sound barely audible beneath the wind sigh. The shot cracked through the valley like a whispered secret. The bullet traveled faster than sound, a tiny fragment of metal propelled by old chemistry and precise math. It struck the alien commander through the chest, punching through armor and flesh before anyone realized what had happened. The figure fell without ceremony, and for a brief moment, the base froze in motion. Panic followed. The aliens scrambled for cover, shields flickering to life. They fired blindly into the snow, beams of light slicing the landscape, but finding nothing. Hale was already moving, sliding backward into a shallow trench he had carved the night before. He left no trace, no heat signature, no visible movement. He watched through a secondary scope as the aliens clustered around the fallen officer. Their body language spoke confusion and disbelief. Hale didn't need to understand their language to know what they were thinking. They had shields against plasma and armor against energy. They had never prepared for a supersonic piece of lead. He checked his ammunition, wiped frost from the bolt, and settled back into the snow. They would send more. They always did, and Hale would be waiting. The storm rolled in with an unnerving swiftness, swallowing the valley beneath veils of white that blurred distance and muted sound. Mason Hale welcomed it. The harsher the weather, the safer he was from the Dominion's scanning arrays, which struggled to differentiate human heat from the endless churn of cold air. He hunkered behind a jagged rise of ice, letting snow accumulate over him until he resembled nothing more than a wind-bent drift. His rifle rested on a frozen ledge, angled toward the alien base but temporarily idle. He needed the storm as cover, not as a shooting opportunity. The Elyth were changing tactics, and he had to adapt just as quickly. Down below, a new formation of alien troops emerged, smaller, leaner individuals clad in reflective plating that seemed to flex like living metal. They moved differently than the regular soldiers, deliberate, listening to the environment instead of relying solely on sensors. Hunters, Hale thought, finally sending the good ones. They fanned out across the valley, deploying spidery drones that burrowed into the snow, their small forms sending delicate tremors through the ground. Hale felt the vibrations as faint tingles beneath his elbows. Seismic trackers. If he shifted too quickly, he would reveal himself. He forced stillness, counting heartbeats, letting the cold bite into his fingers until they numbed. Pain was familiar. Exposure was just another enemy to outwait. One of the hunters paused, lifted its arm, and released a sphere that hovered upward, humming like an insect. It pulsed with soft waves, thermal sweeps, searching for anomalies. Hale carefully unlatched a heat pack from his vest and rolled it down a slope with a gentle flick. The pack clattered against ice, and within seconds the sphere darted toward it. The hunter followed, training a weapon on the decoy. Hale watched the alien's posture shift the moment it realized the heat source was inanimate. A tiny flicker of frustration even its non-human frame couldn't hide. The storm thickened, rattling Hale's hood as gusts beat across the ridge. Visibility dipped to a few meters, but his ears remained sharp. He tracked footsteps, the crunch of armored limbs slicing through crusted snow. When one set of steps broke off from the rest, he recognized an opportunity. The lone hunter circled wide, sweeping its weapon in slow arcs. Hale slid his glove beneath a concealed length of detonation wire buried earlier in the day. With a subtle tug, he triggered a small charge hidden beneath a natural ice overhang. The explosion was muted by the storm, but powerful enough to send shattered ice cascading onto the hunter. It collapsed beneath the weight, struggling to rise. Hale didn't hesitate. He braced the rifle, fired once, and the alien's head snapped back in a spray of fractured armor. He didn't linger. He crawled 5 meters east, relocating to an alternative hide he had prepared in advance. Every position had a purpose. Every escape route had been carved when he first arrived. As he settled into the new spot, he saw the aliens converge on the fallen hunter. Their formation revealed tension. Lines too tight, movements too abrupt. They were learning they were prey. A towering figure emerged among them, radiating command presence even through the blizzard. Hale recognized him from earlier observations, the general. His armor glowed in steady pulses, resisting the cold with stubborn resilience. The general barked orders, sharp, resonant bursts that carried through the wind. The hunters regrouped with renewed urgency, their steps now more cautious. The general raised his head, scanning the white abyss as though expecting Hale to materialize from the storm. "You cannot hide forever," he declared, his voice amplified through alien speakers. The words were rough, distorted by translation algorithms, but understandable. Hale, nestled beneath layers of ice and silence, allowed himself a thin smile. The general wanted a response. He wouldn't get one. Instead, Hale watched him through the scope, noting how the armor panel shifted, where joints weakened under strain, and which sections glowed faintly with shield harmonics. Every detail mattered. Every weakness had potential. The general turned away, unaware that a human was already mapping the variables required for a perfect shot. Hale tightened his grip on the rifle, letting the wind's howl fade into background noise. Soon, he thought. Very soon. The blizzard reached its peak just before dawn, a white curtain so dense it erased the horizon. Mason Hale lay prone on a slope overlooking the valley, his body molded into the ice as though the mountain itself had shaped him. He had not slept in nearly 30 hours, but exhaustion sharpened his focus rather than dulling it. Every nerve felt taut, attuned to the faint vibrations of movement far below. The Dominion troops were reorganizing after the disastrous hunt, and Hale sensed they were preparing something decisive. The storm offered him cover, yet it also offered them desperation. Desperation made enemies unpredictable. Through the swirling snow, faint pulses of light began to form, a rhythmic glow that pushed against the blizzard. Hale recognized the pattern. The general was activating a personal shield at full strength, a shimmering lattice of energy that wrapped him in a cocoon of crystalline brilliance. Even through the storm, the armor's luminous edges glinted like the facets of a frozen sun. Around him, soldiers regrouped in tight formation, their weapons raised, scanning for a target they still believed to be more than one man. Hale adjusted his position with precise, economical movement. He unlatched the insulated case beside him and retrieved a single tungsten round, its surface dull and unassuming in the dim light. He had forged it during the first week after the Dominion landed, shaping it with tools meant for repairing vehicles rather than crafting ammunition. It was heavier than standard rounds, engineered for penetration rather than speed, but with the right powder load and the perfect angle, it would fly truer than anything factory-made. His father had taught him that handcrafted tools carried the will of their maker. Hale hoped he had put enough of his will into this one. The scope revealed flickering glimpses of alien armor through the storm. The general moved with unwavering certainty, as though the blizzard itself parted for him. Hale studied how the shield oscillated, a faint shimmer along the left flank, a slightly delayed pulse across the front. Energy systems, no matter how advanced, always revealed their cycles to a patient observer. He tracked the pattern, counting silently, letting instinct merge with calculation. For seconds between phase realignments. In that moment, the shield thinned just enough. Hale steadied his breathing. The world narrowed until only the crosshairs and the luminous figure existed. Wind gusted fiercely, then shifted. He adjusted for drift, recalibrated for drop, and listened to the way the blizzard's howl dimmed at the edge of each gust. Timing mattered. Precision mattered. But conviction mattered most. When the valley reached a rare heartbeat of stillness, he squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked with a deep, muted thump, lost immediately to the wind. The round tore through the storm in a perfect arc, propelled by old chemistry and cold intent. Hale never saw its full flight. No marksman ever truly did, but he recognized the result instantly. The general staggered as the bullet pierced the weakened phase of the shield, shattering its crystalline glow. A dark fracture spread across his armor, and with a crack like splintering ice, he collapsed. The Dominion formation broke apart in stunned confusion. Soldiers scrambled, searching the storm for artillery that did not exist, shouting in fractured tones that Hale could not understand but fully comprehended. Fear. For the first time since their arrival on Earth, they hesitated. Moments later, a faint rumble approached from the south. Hale shifted his scope and saw the blurred outlines of tracked vehicles and armored silhouettes cresting the distant ridge. Human forces pushing through the storm, drawn by the Dominion's distress signals and Hale's earlier intel bursts. Relief unfurled slowly in his chest, a warmth he had almost forgotten. He rose from his hide, joints stiff, vision swimming. As the rescue convoy neared, soldiers dismounted and stared in disbelief at the scattered alien bodies and the lone human rising from the snow like a ghost. Hale offered them a weary nod. No explanation was needed. The battle for the valley was over, but the war was shifting. Across the stars, the Dominion would rethink every assumption it had made about humanity. And Hale knew this was only the beginning of a much larger reckoning.